2 minutes here. We'll first start with approval of the minutes from the April 17th, 2019 meeting. I did have one correction brought to my attention. The representative from Orange River says was present at the last meeting, was accidentally marked not present, Mr. Charles Morris, so we'll make that correction. With that said, does anybody else have any other suggestions for corrections or changes to the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve. Mr. Sedgwick-Hall moved to approve. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. At this time, we'll take public comment from any non-DAC members on any on agenda items. Seeing none, we will move to our board update. We have the lovely Miss Mary Fisher here.
So this morning we were at the legislative end of session luncheon, and I listened carefully, and then I read all about the updates, not realizing that Ms. Green was going to be here this afternoon. And I went home and I worked for about 40 minutes on a legislative update, which I will not be giving. But Ms. Gittens asked me to thank all of you for your support and hard work with DAC this year. And she had a schedule conflict, so that's why I'm here. And she said, as we come to the end of another school year, she would ask you to answer a few questions to yourself. What did I do this year to promote the success of school advisory committee in my school and the district advisory committee at the district level? What can I do next year to improve each of those and be more inclusive to parents? Why are SAC and DAC important to the success of all of our students? And I think, the answer to that is the involvement of the educators, and particularly the parents and community members. So, and she said, take care and have a most enjoyable summer. And I say the same, and thank you for your commitment to this district. And we look forward to another wonderful year next year. Thank you.
And at this time, we're going to have a year-end update from our superintendent, Dr. Greg Atkins.
Thank you. All right, we've got a lot to cover, which is great because I think we've got a lot of things to update you on, a lot of things going on in the school district. I think overall it was a very, very challenging year, but it was also a very rewarding year in terms of the progress we made on a number of initiatives. So if you look right here, this particular slide, one of the things that we've got going on at the end of this week, this is really cool, is Saturday and Sunday we are graduating about 5,300 students. And this is every single year so far over the last 3 years we've set records, and I think we've got that coming up in a slide. So, but it's a really good year for us. We also, you see the picture there of JROTC. This our JROTC program continues to grow, and if you didn't know, it's the largest JROTC program in the United States of America, and we are expanding it next year, and including, of course, Bonita Springs High School is part of that. So let's just go on through this. Cindy, take me to the next one, actually. All right, one of the things that we are very, very proud of is the fact that every single student in our school district that's graduating, our goal is to make sure that they have industry certification. So industry certification gives them a real skill that they can use in the workplace. And this past year, we actually increased that by 20%. We had well over 5,000 certifications that were given. And so those are just some of the examples that we have. All right, and here you see these are career academies that you see at some of our buildings. This one is from Bonita Springs High School. You can see there on your left, that is our environmental controls laboratory. So that is where kids get literally hands-on with HVAC equipment, And this is operational equipment, so they can actually hook it up and see that the air is running and so forth. This is a big field in, of course, Lee County. And then you've got digital design, which is the young man there at the computer, and then, of course, our medical academy. We work very closely with Lee Health on trying to meet the needs of their particular workforce. Lee Health typically has hundreds of positions advertised every single day, and so keeping up with the demand is important. We're doing that through our career academies. And before I move on, we've got some expansion of some career academies that has taken place this year. Over at South High, you've got a construction academy where they do electrical, they do construction, plumbing. They also have welding, which is fantastic. And we're not talking about welding, silly stuff. We're talking about real, honest-to-goodness welding, where they can come out certified and ready to move over to the next level. They have auto mechanics over there. They also have an agriculture program over there, another expanding field. And you see this at other ones like Ida Baker, East Lee County. You have some of these academies at our other schools that are more traditional, like Estero High School as an example. We were one of only 2 school districts in the state of Florida to receive the AP Honor Roll. And that means when you're talking about the AP Honor Roll, you're talking about actually increasing the number of students that are taking and passing AP classes, and also closing some achievement gaps in that area as well. So one of only 2 in the entire state. Our ACT scores are up, so that's a positive thing. One of the things that we try to look at, the FSA is great, end-of-course exams are great, but what about how are we doing against more of a national standard? So ACT is an example of where our scores continue to improve. Okay? I talked a little bit about this as district graduation rate. So district graduation rate for the last few years, our district graduation continues to go up. Last year we set a record. This past year we set another record. We had the highest graduation rate that we've ever seen in district history. And the other thing that we had that's very, very important is we made the largest jump that we've ever seen in a long, long time. It was over a 4% jump, which was faster in terms of a jump than what you see across the state. So we were exceeding our graduation rate faster than what you see at the state level. And then the other graph is you start to see that some of our subgroups, we are actually closing the achievement gap with our African American students, our Hispanic students, also our English language learners and ESE students. So in other words, they are actually improving their graduation rate. Even though we made like over a 4% jump, some of these groups had an even higher jump. So their graduation rate was increasing even faster, which is good because we're closing that achievement gap. The other thing is continue to see our school grades. This is the number of AP schools that we have in the school district, and that, again, continues to increase every single year. So we're up to 55%, and hopefully this next year it will be even higher, or this year will be even higher than that. Another very, very important statistic or number that you have to look at, just 4 years ago, we had 23 schools in our school district that were DF schools. That means differentiated accountability, where the state system ranked them as either a D or F. This past year, we only had 1 school that was ranked a D, and really that school, if you look at what the graduation rate, because the state's like 1 year behind in the graduation rate, its graduation rate last year would have actually qualified it to get out of DA status. So even that 1 school really shouldn't have been, except that the state was a year behind with the graduation rate. So we only have 1 right now, and we're proud from bringing it from 23 down to just 1. Okay, we do have the ABCs. This is another initiative that our Academic Services Division has forwarded, that we're talking about attendance, behavior, and classroom success. And this is, of course, you'll hear us talk about the ABC initiative. That's what that is. So we rolled that out this past year. All right, and Cindy, I can't remember what this one was about, so you help me out here. PBS.
Okay.
Okay.
So it could be that, but it also could be that the most important factor in student success is the classroom teacher.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. All right, let's go to the next one then. So career ladder, this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but we do have a career ladder in our school district. This is the ultimate goal of this is we would love to be the first school district that literally where we have a six-figure teacher. Now, and I mean six-figure salary teacher. Now, that sounds like a lot, but if you think about it, what we're trying to do is create a career path for some of our teachers that allows them to expand in terms of their compensation, but also expand their opportunity for increased responsibility, have a larger footprint in terms of what their impact is, both inside and outside the classroom, but also compensate them for that. And therefore, taking our talented teachers and keeping them in the classroom. Because right now, and like when I was a classroom teacher, there was no career ladder really. It was just you go through a step every year. If you wanted to jump up in salary, you had to become an administrator or something like that and leave the classroom. So a lot of like our golden apple teachers that you hear so much about, these are phenomenal teachers, but if they want to increase in their career, they end up, many of them, leaving the classroom. So rather than having them all leave the classroom, providing some opportunities that allow them to stay within the classroom. We want to work on this budget because we knew that times are tight in the state of Florida in terms of what we're going to get for funding. So we did we really looked at our budget this past year, and because of the work that we did, we were able to put an increased amount of money into compensation. And so we were able to increase teacher compensation. Just a few years ago, it was at the 40th percentile of the state. We've actually been able to jump that up to the 60th percentile. So we're above the state average in terms of how we pay our teachers, and our goal is to get into the top 25%. So by better budgeting, we are actually getting there, so we're paying our teachers more than before compared to their colleagues. So now, again, we're at the 60th percentile in the state, so that's a big plus, and we're able to put 6% into the salary schedule. Now for a teacher, that's going to translate somewhere between 2 and 9%, depending on where they are on the career ladder. All right. This is some great news. In fact, Carol is here. She's going to talk a little bit about this, but just to steal a little of the thunder, Senator Benaquisto, who is our senator here in our region, and of course Representative Spencer Roach, sponsored a bill for us. And Senator Benaquisto, to her credit, she has worked tirelessly for us on this bill for the last 3 years. Well, they got it across just about to the finish line. It's on the governor's desk. This is a bill that would actually pay our students who graduate from our schools, from a teacher academy, to go to either FSW or FGCU on a full scholarship for 4 years, tuition, books, and then come back and teach for the school district. It also provides scholarships for students that are at FSW or FGCU to change majors. If you're a junior or senior, change majors, become a teacher. It'll pay your tuition and books, and then, of course, again, an obligation to come teach for the school district, because we certainly have a teacher shortage. So they have sponsored this bill. This is going to put a lot more money into this program. This can be a program that can be replicated in different places throughout the state of Florida, but it started here with our local delegation. In addition to that, Suncoast Credit has already given us $250,000 for the next 5 years, so we've already started this program using some of our contributions from business. We have 7 students, I believe, that are currently in the program that are benefiting right now today, thanks to the partnership that we have with Suncoast. And the Foundation for Lee County Public Schools is going to help us also work to raise additional dollars for this, because we need, I've said this to this group before, we typically hire, at least 500 teachers every single year. I've seen us hire up to 800 teachers every year. And the teacher education colleges simply are not keeping pace with that demand. So this helps give our kids an opportunity to go to a state college or university, earn a degree, come back and teach for us tuition free. All right, student growth. We are doing a lot with student growth. We just opened this year Bonita Springs High School, as you know, and we continue to expand that school. We broke ground on a major renovation of Lehigh Senior High School that adds a wing, and through the renovation and also the additional wing of this school, we are going to add another approximately 700 student stations to the East Zone. So that's going to open up this very next school year. So it will be about a 2,500 student station facility. It's now an 1,800 student station facility. So we're getting that started. And then in the following school year on this very campus, we're going to open up another 400 to 450 seats, and we're going to start MMM, which is on the Gateway site. That will be the next high school for the school district. That will be a 2,000 student station facility that's off of Gateway. But we will open with a freshman class the following year, 400 to 450 students, and then the year after that, it will open full bore at 2,000 students. We also have plans to build an elementary and a middle in the East Zone, and we're going to start with a K-8 in the South Zone, which will be our innovation school with the FGCU, Florida Gulf Coast University, and then we'll expand that to another middle school, and we're going to have an academic village concept down there in Estero. So we're working with the village council to put together really that dream of having an academic village down there that will have literally kindergarten through high school right there near Estero. We all know this was a big reason why we can do these construction projects, because we were successful with the referendum. And that is going to provide us over the next 10 years, at least right now we're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of about $750 million over the next 10 years. But with major projects like that, in addition to safety and security and the maintenance of our other buildings, we will definitely put that money to good use. So you guys have seen this before. This is where we were at in funding, where you started at $318 million back in 2006 and 2007. It got reduced just 10 years later, clear down to $118 million, so you took $200 million out of our capital budget. But this is going to give us, really some additional revenue of approximately $70 million every single year, over and above, what you see there, so that will certainly help. It doesn't get us back to the 2006, 2007, but it is allowing us to start building these buildings without debt, so we can start paying we don't have to pay for the debt on some of these buildings, so you're not passing that burden on to our kids. So that's a really, really good thing. So what does this get? Capital dollars. Not to be, there is still some confusion out there, and this is important. We can't put this money into paying teachers more. We can't put this money into classroom materials. But what we can use this money for is to build schools. We can use it also to help rebuild schools like Franklin Park Elementary. We're right now working with the state to try to get approval to absolutely really just tear that school down while building a brand new school for those students. Same thing for Cypress Lake. We see the principal right in the back. Mm-hmm. So good news is that we're working right now. We have what's called a custody report that has recommended, this is an independent firm that recommends what to do, whether we renovate a facility or does it make more financial sense to what they call raise a facility, tear that facility down and rebuild it. They're recommending a rebuild, and so now what we're doing is working on getting state approval to do that. Facility improvements, also paying for major capital projects like chiller systems, HVAC chiller systems, roofs, windows, like we've got a window project going on right now at Lehigh Senior High School. Enhancements to technology, particularly safety and security. So we talk about like single point of entry. Just about every single one of our buildings right now has video surveillance in front. So you have to like push a button, they can view you on camera, you have to show your ID. So most schools now have that, and if you don't have that yet, you will probably get that before the summer is out. And then the other thing that's happening is single point entry. Almost all of our schools are single point entry, and in some cases we're just going back and really tweaking it, like at Estero High School. They're almost at single point. We just have a little bit more to do with that, and then we'll get there. Okay? We know that, we want to be transparent. We also want to have community overwatch. So we have the ISOC committee, and that is really our independent sales Surtax committee. They look at every dollar we spend and report back to the public whether or not they felt that was an appropriate expenditure. And then in addition to that, they are looking forward at what we're spending money on and making recommendations around that. So these are people that are well known really in our community, like Jim Nathan, for example, is an example, or Joe Mazurkowitz is another example. These are people that we all know that are very independent of the school district, but are on this Surtax committee and are giving us some really good advice and some really good financial minds on that committee as well. Okay, and I think I've covered that. So the really neat thing about this is that you can actually go right now on our website and you can watch how this money is being spent. So you just click on that, and then you can go and it can tell you, how much revenue we've received in as a result of the sales tax and how that money is being spent right now. So you can see that, it gets updated, and you can even drill down to individual schools and see how dollars have been spent at that school or will be. Now many schools, this is a 10-year plan. So some of these projects are happening right now, like the ones I just talked about, like the addition on Lehigh Senior High School. That's one that's dollars are being spent right now on that project. Window replacement at that school being spent right now. The board's approving a number of different projects. As you can see this in our board agendas, there are referendum projects being spent, but then it will show up here for the public right on this website. So that just gives you some examples of what that would look like. Okay?
That's
Again,
high
just more
school.
examples. All right, this one I think is really important, and if you get a chance if you visit your child's school, I would ask that you do this if you get the opportunity. Thank the law enforcement officer if you bump into them. I have to, you don't know how deeply appreciative I am, really, of the city of Cape Coral and their city council and Fort Myers and the Fort Myers City Council, the county commissioners, and the sheriff's department and Sanibel. They have all stepped up and really, we've spent, we contribute half of the cost of an SRO, and they take care of the rest. And sometimes their rest is a little bit more because they have to do the equipment and things like that. So all of these groups have really stepped up to the plate and helped us out. We also have a really good partnership with the village of Estero. Estero is out there, that group, they have a group that's kind of on the side that's comprised of some of those council members and meeting with village representatives that help raise money for our school district. They've given, I just heard from a principal yesterday at Estero, they're giving all those area schools down there $6,000. They just donated 2 golf carts to 2 of those schools when our golf carts were broken. So these are the types of things that these partnerships have done to make sure our kids are safer in schools, and also to provide some of our schools additional resources that we wouldn't necessarily be able to provide them. This is a really good thing. We just went through a district accreditation, and what that is we have independent people that evaluate school systems, school districts across not only this country but also other countries. It's actually an international organization, and they evaluate the educational quality in your school district. So you do this every 5 years. And we did this 5 years ago, and we had, we received accreditation in that, but we also had some findings that we had to deal with 5 years ago. This particular time, it really turned out to be an excellent evaluation. If you look at really where all scores tend to fall, they fall, very close to that line between, having, being of high impact versus a need to improve. We, on the other hand, were significantly higher in overall score. So not only did we receive district accreditation, but we also had a score that was really ranked significantly higher than what was typical for school districts across the country. So that's a good thing. All right, just some things here about some successes that we see, and this is again working with our foundation and others. But just to mention a couple, the kid there with the flag, I think some of you know who he is. His name is Kevin DeMaculangan. Kevin is a world champion in Excel. So he received the world championship. And he's the only American this past year to receive that honor. So we have a student here that just received that award this past year in Excel, and the only American to do so. Kevin is currently competing this year, I'm understanding, as in PowerPoint. So I think that's a really cool thing. I mean, how often do you actually get to meet a world champion? What else on this that I might?
That's really it. This is why we do what we do.
Okay.
Yes, Dunbar High School.
Yes, Dunbar High School. One of the things that I do want to encourage you to do, and I think this should be at the end of this presentation, but one of the things I would like you to encourage you to do, there are some phenomenal student stories that are out there. They're just fantastic. If you go on our district website to Lee TV and just look at the video, the media content, there's a lot of really cool individual stories about things that our students have accomplished. Things that, like there's Yuhan Burgess is a student at Cypress Lake High School, just a kind of an incredible story. There's a story about some students at Varsity Lakes that have raised money for a school in Africa serving, I think, 700 students that did not have water, and they raised the, they were supposed to raise something like $5,000, and they raised actually over $7,000. So that little school actually now has a freshwater source for students, and they were able to also go and build bathrooms that also had fresh water available to wash their hands and everything, because water is an issue across the world, and a lot of students, a lot of kids across the world die because of issues with contaminated drinking water. So here's our students, through really working with their teacher, coming up with money to do something like that. So that's just a couple of examples that are on our website. Another one is South High, where they raised money for a young lady who needed a prosthetic leg. She never really had walked, and they were able to raise money for a prosthetic leg, and they were able to get her a prosthetic leg, and now this student can walk because of the actions of her fellow students. So just a lot of great stories that I could share with you, and I just encourage you, if you ever get a moment, go on our website and do that. So that's all. I think we're a little ahead of schedule, so I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Carlin.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. So it's always great to have the superintendent come and do a year-end wrap-up. And so we also want to let you know that we know you're interested, and we talked about this in Executive DAC, about seeing the metrics, all of the academic information. And as you well know, over the summer, that's when we receive all of that information. So we will come back in September and share all of the academic information with you. So how the children did on all the Florida Standards assessments, the end of course assessments, and then we will also have all of our end of the year strategic plan metrics that we'll be able to share very in depth with you. So we're excited about that. I'm going to just throw in a little commercial real quickly. So at the last meeting, we said goodbye to Cassie, our secretary, and I want to introduce our new secretary for DAC, and that is LaTanya Thomas. So if you'll join me in welcoming her. LaTanya was in our superintendent's office. She has been the director's secretary for diversity and inclusion, and I am really lucky that she has chosen to come work in partnership with us. So if you get a chance tonight, just make sure you say hi and give her a big DAC welcome. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you somebody who is very important to our district. She currently serves as a consultant where she keeps us abreast of all of the legislation that is pending or has passed, and some of it is still pending, but she's here tonight to share with you a legislative update. There has been a flurry of activity in Tallahassee, and Carol Green is here tonight to provide us with a look at what has gone through the legislature at this point in terms of passage, what is still pending, and anything else that you may want to hear from her this evening. She'll be available for questions as well. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you. It's great to be with you this evening. Ms. Fisher, I'm really sorry. I will stand down and let you give the and then Dr. Atkins goes and steals the one really good thing I had to tell you about. No. It's great to be with you this evening. First and foremost, I need to tell you I did not do a PowerPoint, and there's a good reason for me not doing a PowerPoint, because everything is changing on a daily basis right now. Because right now we ended session a day late, but that was okay. So that was ended May 4th. This is the 15th. And, and the governor is just now starting to see bills end up on his desk. And until he sees them on his desk and actually makes that final decision to sign, not to sign, things are changing. So I'm doing everything the good old-fashioned way, handwritten notes. So let me share with you just a couple of things before we get into the subject at hand of education. That was my disclaimer, by the way, that what I'm telling you today, don't memorize, because it may change tomorrow. But I will tell you that there were 3,571 bills filed this year. That's not unusual. I mean, it sounds like a big number, but it is not unusual to see that many filed. So 3,571 bills were filed. There were almost 3,000 amendments made to those bills. So there's a lot of movement, especially towards the end of session, which is, again, not unusual. And anybody want to guess how many bills actually passed? I got the number, so 196 out of the 3,000 plus. 196 passed. As of today, right now, I just checked my email. As of today, right now, 31 have been signed by the governor out of the 196. Out of that 196 that have been, out of 31 that have been signed, he has 20 currently sitting on his desk. He has 15 days to sign those. And so right now we're just waiting to see what happens with all of those. So that means we have about 142 still pending, including the budget. And it's interesting because the Grow Your Own that Dr. Atkins referred to from Senator Benaquisto and Representative Roach is embedded in the budget. So until the budget's signed, we won't have that signature done. And the governor does have the line item veto, so we're watching that right now. Interestingly enough, I had an opportunity to speak with Senator Benaquisto today and Representative Roach, and they both are fighting very hard to make sure that stays in, as did your school board. When they were in Tallahassee visiting with me a few weeks ago, we met with the governor's staff to make sure that we answered any questions they had. So we wanted to be very proactive because it is a great program, and it's a win. It's a big win for Lee County, and it certainly could be a win for across the state for other people who would be able to duplicate that effort. One other statistic I thought you might find interesting, because I do have people ask me this from time to time, is when you actually look at the overall budget, if you get that pie there and you start graphing it out as to where monies are going, as of today, this particular budget, which was $91.1 billion, that's the B word, billion dollars in that budget, 42% went to Health and Human Services, 42%. And education was at 28.5%, second largest piece of that pie is education. It used to be education was the biggest, but healthcare eclipsed that probably about 10 or 15 years ago, that we actually saw an eclipse of that. So then everything else just trickles down from there. So we're really here to talk about education tonight and about some of the things that happened there. One of the things that I think is very interesting to share with you too, another statistic if you will, I really don't like statistics that much, but it seems important to share with you so that you get an idea of exactly what's going on whenever we're faced with what we're doing in Tallahassee. Of the 3,000 plus bills that I was telling you about, we had 104 of those bills that directly touched education, directly. A lot of them probably touched in kind of a tangential way, if you will, but 104 that my team, we were tracking for you till the end, that 104. Out of the 104, we ended up with 12 that passed and actually made it through the process. Now, of that 12 that made it through the process, parts of the 104 different bills that were out there, pieces of those got amended into some of those big bills, because the 12 that passed, several of them are pretty good sized bills touching on a lot of different issues, which I'm going to go into now and tell you a little bit about that. Of the 12, there were also some that were very non-controversial bills, if you will. They passed with a majority of vote. Most of them didn't have even a negative vote. Just to give you just an idea about what some of those were like, we had one that actually allowed members of the JROTC, did I say that right? Sometimes I mix those letters up. That they were able to wear their uniform as opposed to a graduation gown when they graduate. And so that bill was 1 page, 2 pages maybe. So things like that are very non-controversial. Good reason for it. There had been a problem in some school across the state, and they came forward and asked Senator Lee to champion that. He did, and that passed obviously without any problem. Another non-controversial, teaching civics in school. Not a controversial issue at all. Passed unanimously. I think you'll find it more interesting for me to address some of the bills that didn't pass unanimously and that were very controversial. Anybody in here hear anything about guns this year? Yeah, did you hear anything about teachers carrying guns? Do we have teachers here who are going to start carrying guns tomorrow? I don't think so. Your school board has been very proactive about that particular issue. In fact, before the bill was even well, the bill has been signed. Before that bill was even signed, they took it upon themselves to actually have a roundtable with law enforcement here in the community, and I applaud them for that because they were on top of it. They said, let's discuss this. I can tell you that the interesting thing for me, and I've been doing this now for 20, 25 years, is that that bill, which is something like 2,500 lines to the bill, I don't know how many lines there are to a page, but 2,500 lines. And out of 2,500 lines, the gun piece, the guardian piece, isn't the whole bill, but it's the most controversial piece to the bill. And every time that that bill was heard in Tallahassee, some of you may have watched it on TV, you may have seen the news reports. It was standing room only. It was, the rooms were packed with people testifying on that one piece on that bill. Because again, it was extremely, extremely controversial. The bill passed along party line, and it was signed into law. That bill is based strictly on the recommendations from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission. That commission was a 400-page report that came back, and that was one of the recommendations from that report. So you can imagine the fact that many of the legislators who were part of that commission or were certainly privy to the report, which of course any of us can read, picked up on that, felt very strongly about it, the fact that that recommendation came from that tragedy here in our state, and because it came out of that report, they added that to the bill. The one thing they did, though, that I think people may have missed is the fact that it's totally optional. It's strictly up to your community, to your setting, to whatever you need to do for your community in cooperation with your sheriffs and your police departments. So because of that, this board has been, and administration has been very active to make sure that they have addressed that early on, to make sure that didn't necessarily happen. But the argument, just so people understand, because I didn't understand either, because everyone that I talked to was against this. And when you look at polling numbers, if you believe polling numbers, the polling numbers will tell you that across the state, people are against this. But then you get into these really small rural communities, and they just don't have the police force or the sheriffs or the people that maybe they need. And so they may need to make a different decision. So that's what the legislators were trying to do. Let's give them that opportunity to make that different decision if they need to do that. So just so everybody understands, that's part of what that was really about, was making sure that people had that as their option, especially since it came out of a report that was so meaningful to so many. I would tell you that we also saw this year, and I'll make time for questions, I promise, but I also wanted to talk about one of the other bigger pieces of legislation that we saw this year, and that was what we call the Omnibus 7070 Education Committee K through 12 Education Bill, which takes into account lots of different things. It takes on, I'm looking because I don't want to forget anything that's in there. It expands educational choice. It's the one that actually brought to power the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program, which they believe will serve up to 18,000 students. And the monies for that program is coming out of the FEFP. And that was certainly a monumental change for the way that scholarship programs are being handled, but that is the way they determined to do that. They do say there's a waiting list for people to be able to receive what many of us call vouchers. This is called a scholarship, but many of us would call it a voucher. They also did another thing this year, which is not uncommon, what we call tweaking. They were tweaking the program called the Best and Brightest Teacher and the Best and Brightest Principal programs. Those have been programs that have been criticized in the past because they are looking back at someone's SAT scores. I see you're laughing about that, I know. I would be too. But that's been taken out as a factor. And I think that tweak was probably one of the things that made everybody smile a little bit, because now they're really looking directly at the highly effective and the effective teachers and being able to make the decisions based on that, as opposed to something that maybe you took a few years ago. So I think that that's something that's really was important to find this year. So that's one thing that they did with that. The other thing that they worked on, which is right in the sweet spot too, if you will, about teachers, and that was teacher certification. The general knowledge exam specifically. And it's one of the things that we've been talking about all year with our legislators. Representative Byron Donalds from Collier County really took a hold of that and became quite a champion, actually, with that particular issue. It had some bumps in the road as you go along. Some of the people with the Department of Education didn't like it. There are those who would like to say that's, that we should be expecting higher things of our teachers. We're expecting higher things of our students. So we should be expecting higher things of our teachers. But it really did seem to be somewhat unfair. Not only was it unfair because of the fact that it was making a requirement on the general knowledge piece, it's also unfair from the standpoint that it became very expensive, because every time you had to retake it, you were then spending that kind of money again, and the dollars just start adding up. So those are two things that they did to make sure that they helped to address that. They also worked somewhat, we're still on the same bill now. I went from guns to this big bill, and I've been on that big bill ever since we left guns.
Carol, just one thing I wanted to say about the certification piece, if you don't
Absolutely.
mind.
No, not at all.
I do want to give credit to Byron Donalds. I mean, he actually met with some of our board members and some of members of our staff, and Carol was there as well at Bonita Springs High School. Even though he really represents Collier County, he came up and listened to us at Bonita Springs High School and took our input. We talked a great deal about this very issue with him. And then he got some superintendents together on a conference call, and I was a part of that, so we were able to give him input there as well. I think you probably mentioned this, but we have literally over 1,000 teachers that were rated effective or highly effective that were terminated across the state of Florida because they hadn't passed the general knowledge exam. Okay, so these are teachers that actually had taught for a year, received an effective or highly effective rating. Their students did well enough on state exams to provide that teacher with that type of evaluation, yet we had to terminate because of that certification exam. And the piece about the certification exam is a lot of that stuff, if you don't remember, like say, stuff on polygons and angles and parallel lines from 10th grade, 10th grade, even if you're college educated in some other field, there are questions on that test that you just won't remember. And so that's why a lot of our teachers had to go back and retake that. So that really was a step in the right direction, and we certainly appreciate those efforts.
Absolutely, and that was that example, because I've heard you give that example, was the example I used whenever I was lobbying that initiative with other legislators and other lobbyists too that we were talking to about it. Was that specific example actually? So yeah, it was really great to have, and kudos too to not only Byron, but Kathleen Pasadomo joined us that day. Spencer Roach joined us that day. I know that Dane Eagle sent his staff that day too,
Right.
and they did spend a great deal of time, which was really refreshing. And along that same lines about that school and other schools that you have too, again, still with the same bill that's got lots and lots of different moving parts, is the career and technical education piece, which you were speaking about earlier too. And that's something that now they have established an alternate graduation path for people who choose to do career, and of course now you're able to offer a lot of that in the school with your HVAC and all of those types of things that you have going on there. There is another bill too that that got signed today, actually, and that was the taxation bill. And there's a taxation bill every year. This is nothing new. And it gets signed independent of the budget, even though it is about money. And that bill was interesting this year too, because there was a lot of debate about it. What the taxation bill does every year is that's the bill where they actually assign a specific length of time that they're going to give you the back to school holiday for shopping, or the hurricane supply shopping days that they have. The thing that got interesting about that, and just because I know you're going to talk a little bit about legislative priorities in a few minutes, is that what they did in the debate was the legislators decided that anytime there's a tax referendum that's done in a community, that money has to be shared. It has to be shared equally across the board with the charters and the public schools. That became a huge debate, and that was amended in the 11th hour, literally, back to say that it was just something that was going to go forward, that it wasn't going to go back and try and pull anything. Now, it didn't really affect us, but it did affect several of the folks on the East Coast. And the East Coast delegation was the one who was actually driving that, but it didn't pass that way, and we watched that one up until the end to make sure that the verbiage didn't change. We were quite concerned, in fact, that it might. But that, again, is another party line vote.
And what you might want to mention that's relevant to that very issue is the amount of PICO dollars that charter schools receive relative to other more traditional schools.
Right, and they received a huge amount of PICO dollars as opposed to the fact I believe we got zero.
Right.
Yeah. 100, off the top of my head, it was like 154 million to zero.
So that's
PICO
public education capital outlay dollars, which is capital dollars for construction.
For construction or for repair or those types of things, yes. I tell people at times that I have a crystal ball, but I do that just to make fun. I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, gosh darn, the lottery ticket had been in my hand. But, but I do want you to know that I do have some things that I'm going to throw out now just for you to think about, because I know that Dr. Carlin and I have talked quite a bit about this too, about the fact that the advisory council is probably wanting to look at some things that they think would be important to your students here, and what you're seeing is some things that you would like to maybe potentially bring forward and to your school board, and have them be able to then hear from you about some of the things that you're thinking about. And I would just throw these out in no particular order, but just some of the things that Dr. Carlin and I were talking about and thinking about. Some of the things that happen every year is every bill that gets passed, of those 12 bills, there's probably only about 3 or 4 of those bills that are really going to be in a situation of doing what I was calling with the tweaking. But there will be things that will happen, because there's always unintended consequences from bills, and that they really are unintended. I really believe that in my heart and soul. Things do pop up that then have to be fixed the next year. Now, the thing that's interesting is the next year starts in 4 months. So it's going to be a really quick turnaround. So in other words, if you look at your calendar, what happens in 4 months? You start back to school. So how many of these things that got signed into law that didn't go into effect until July 1st really have had an opportunity to get to a point of needing tweaking? Because they really haven't been put into play yet. But we have some really, really brilliant legislators, and they can figure some of those things out. So that they'll come back and say, by the way, I think we need to do this. You'll also remember whenever I first started speaking that I told you there were 104 education bills that we were tracking this year, and only 12 of them passed. So I'm fairly certain that some of those issues didn't just go away. I think that they just hadn't made it to their day, if you will. We always talk about the fact it takes 3 tries, 3 bites of the apple before you can actually get legislation passed. So some of the things that you're going to see that are going to come back that you may want to talk about a little bit, again, in no particular order, and I'm certainly not giving you any advice. This is just information. And that information is this. Term limits for school board members is not gone away. It did not pass this year. It did not get it through the CRC either, or through, well, they got through the CRC. They didn't make it through the courts. But term limits is something that is not going to go away, and it didn't pass. Other things that you're going to see, equitable sharing of funds between charters and traditional public schools is something that's going to be talked about every year until I'm off in the nursing home somewhere. So there's always going to be a debate, in my opinion. Teacher recruitment and retention. You heard what Dr. Atkins said about the number of new teachers you're hiring every year. That's not going to go away either, and that's one of the things that really has to be thought about. Safety issues. My gosh, again, kudos to your school board and your administration, your staff. When we went down the list of a lot of the things from the Marjorie Stoneham Douglas, a lot of the things that needed to be done, a lot of those things have either been done already here in Lee County, or they're in the process of being done. I think I'm absolutely accurate in that, am I not?
Yes.
Yeah, and so they have really been very proactive about making sure your students are safe, and that your staff is safe, not just your students, but your staff too is safe. So they've done a lot of that already, but safety issues are always going to come up, and funding's always an issue. One of the other things that some of the legislators have talked about, I think Representative Donalds has talked about too, is flexibility in funding. You know, one of the things that's always been a concern is, you know, you give me money, but it's all in silos. And because it's all in silos, it becomes very hard, you know, to dance around what you need to do about different things. So I think those things are all things that I see as potentials for coming back. Denise, have I forgotten something that we've talked about? I think those were the things that we kind of hit on. I can't stop talking without talking about mental health and the mental health issues. And I know it's very, very near and dear to Ms. Fisher's heart. It is to mine too. And that was certainly addressed to a certain extent this year. with the Marjorie Stoneham Douglas bill. I'm sorry I neglected to mention that. The 70-30 bill, Marjorie Stoneham Douglas, when we got to talking about guns, I got off on guns, just like everybody does. And I forgot to tell you there's another piece there, and that's about the assessment, that assessing kids earlier, making sure there's a statewide database, making sure that you don't have a kid that you know is really going to have problems and they get transferred to another school and the record doesn't follow them. You know, those are the types of things that they're looking at, saying, if we know we have a problem here, instead of just taking Johnny and moving Johnny to another school, when we move Johnny to the other school, we better make sure that his records go with him, or Mary, her records go with her, so that we make sure that that assessment that's done, so that we can stop some of this, because it's morally the right thing to do, and also it may actually save a life. So that's another thing that was really touched on, and I know you're a big champion of that too, as is Senator Pasadomo, who has made sure that there was monies put in for that particular initiative, and she recommitted again today, I believe, that she was going to do that same thing. I'm glad to take any questions you have or listen to your concerns. I know that Dr. Carlin's going to take hold here now and help you, help her, help us make some decisions about some of the direction that you would like to go in. Is there something that I've forgotten, Denise?
No, I think at this point, what we'll do is we'll open it up for questions, Scott. So and I'll let you lead that. Just remind everybody to come to the podium.
So say if you have a question, please come up to the podium, state your name and your school, and ask your question. And keep your questions focused. We'll try not to let anybody monopolize the time and be mindful of that. Since I'm here, I'm going to start with a question. So Scott Hertz on behalf of Gulf Middle School. As we talk about charter schools, and certainly it's clear that our legislature favors them and is trying to do a lot of things for them, is there any work to differentiate between a truly private charter school run by a private organization versus a municipal charter school, or the types of charter schools like the FSW Collegiate Academy, where there's a strong public component that at least if the charter school doesn't continue on, the public still owns the property, the public gets some benefit out of the investments? I don't seem to hear that, and that's something I would like to learn more about.
That's a great question, actually, and it's something that does get debated and something that gets talked about often. But as far as any delineation that's actually in statute or in writing, I can't point to a statute on that. I can tell you it is debated, it is talked about, and it's something that does need to happen, because that's Carol Green's opinion. Put my Carol Green hat on and tell you that is something that is a struggle for many people to understand that. One of the things I think that's most important that you hit on in that comment question is the fact that if the charter school then no longer is in existence, and then you have the building and the issues of the fact that the PICO money and all of those things that have happened, there has been an attempt to make some changes there, and I'll be the first person to tell you I don't remember the exact details of that, but there have been some movement in that direction to make sure of how things are given back to the community. I'll have to look at that a little bit closer. I don't recall right off the top of my head, but I do remember reading something about that just recently. I don't know if I answered that whole, but it is something that the take on that is from the legislators, from the debate. I can give you the debate, which you already know, but I can give it to you just because, in case there's somebody who hasn't heard that, and that is the parent makes the best choice for their child. They should have the ability to make the choice for their child regardless of their economic status, and that because of that we need to open up more and more of the scholarships, they're calling them now, as opposed to vouchers. So that is the whole take on that. That's the whole selling point on that, and the fact that charter schools are public schools. So is that going to happen in the near future? Probably not, only because of the fact that most of the leadership in the legislature right now feel very strongly about that, and they're still going to be there next year.
And just to piggyback on a little bit, we've always, considered ourselves a relatively charter-friendly district. We have a larger number of charter schools than most school districts do, other than some, I think, over on the East Coast, there's some extremely large numbers. But we're working to try to have a closer relationship, because ultimately when you see our school grade or our district grade or our graduation rate, that's also including our charter schools. So I told you today 82.2% or something like that, our graduation rate. Actually, our high schools, our 13 high schools that are currently graduating students, the graduation rate is over 91%. But the 82% reflects all schools. Now, in defense of our charter schools, because if you look at like the city municipal charters over in Cape Coral that have great graduation rates, you know, other charter schools serve very at-risk populations. So I don't want to blame charter schools on our graduation rate, because it's together as a team. One of the things that I think we also need to encourage is really a better working relationship with these charters, particularly our municipal charters. We're starting to work really well with the city of Cape Coral and John Zerlag, the city manager. In fact, we're having this discussion about the future of the Cape Coral municipal charters right now, and the relationship it has with the school district.
Yes.
Or all our kids.
And one of the things that I think is really important too is because of the being proactive with the choice that you actually have in Lee County, which others don't have. And so that's creating more of a problem for other counties than what we have here. It was interesting this year because for the first time that I remember in my 20 years, they actually had panel discussions about, there were 3 counties, which I've got them written down, but the names escape me right now. 3 counties that did come and do proposals on how they operate choice. And if you do that, then you can have the good relationships. It's not an adversarial one. And I think that's what you're saying, and I would agree.
Hi, I'm Julie Martinez. I'm with Orangewood Elementary, and I have a few questions. I'll just ask the first one. I'm doing it as out of importance, I feel. So with the school safety and the enhancements that have been made, and in light of 15 school shootings in this new year, I'm wondering if if in our district, if we would look into having metal detectors for the students to go through.
That's more to Dr. Atkins.
Yeah, that is one of those issues that we continue to look at. What I've asked our safety and security team is you have to look at working models that you see across the United States, and so they are doing that. You also have to think about the logistics of doing it. So if you think about, let's take a typical high school of 2,000 students. If you look at how much time does it take to take 200 students and move them through a metal detector, you know, that is something that can take, and I can't remember the exact statistic, but it takes a long period of time, like over an hour, to get a large number of students through a metal detector. So that means you have to employ multiple metal detectors across your school, and then you have to staff them as well. So you have to make that a consideration. But I have had and continue to have Mr. Parfit look at that issue to see if there's any type of workable model. The other side of it, though, is the mental health and the human element. What you find time and time again is training of existing staff, teachers, administrators, and our support staff in terms of being able to recognize these type of behaviors. That's why we now have, every school has a threat assessment team. So they look at students, they look at threats, and then they ascertain whether or not that's a threat. So if you think about the Parkland situation, there was multiple places where if you had a threat assessment team that was functioning correctly, it would have latched on to, hey, here's a student that we need to take a look at. So now at our schools, every school has a threat assessment team that does just that. So if you have a threat, that team of human beings looks at that and really makes a professional assessment of the threat in that building. So we're considering all of that. The other piece that's a little bit brand new is the adaptive technology that we're able to use. Like vaping is a big issue. I think, didn't you all have a discussion on vaping? And did they talk about the technology piece?
Yes.
So that's an example of where we can start to use other types of technology as well to help with safety and security issues in our building. So it's still on the table. You're not going to see it next year. You're not going to see metal detectors in all of our buildings.
Well, and I'm asking this because it's nice that, yes, if I'm going to sign in at school, they see me, they click the door. Maybe if I were to mean harm, I'm only getting the people at the front desk. I can't get out. But the children are hurting other children, and they just flow right into school, and they carry backpacks. And, it seems to me that and yes, the mental health aspect is great. I worked in mental health for years, and you can look perfectly normal and have mental health issues and yes, maybe if you you dig deeper, you figure that out. And that's kind of happens with all of these cases. But I feel as a parent, I just feel, are we doing enough? And I don't want to sit and wait.
And I don't want to sit and wait either.
I know.
I mean, what I've asked him to do is if you continue to the technology improves. If you continue to go out there and find a situation where you have a workable metal detection system where you can get students in and out of a school quickly and efficiently, yet still do that detection, then we're all for it. Right now, with the current metal detection technology, with the time it takes to send students through, it's really not a viable option for traditional schools. We have looked at other models that have occurred in some other school districts, but those models are models that are used typically in atypical schools, like schools that are primarily for disciplinary issues. And I do know that we do some of that over at Success Academy, at least where we were wanding students coming in and out. So there is that goes on there.
Well, if not metal detectors, due to logistics, and this would be a logistic issue too, but if you go anywhere where there's a big event, you have somebody who looks through your bags and pats them down and looks through them, and it's quick if it's done right, and there's multiple stations to go to, but it just seems to me that that just children, the students, can bring on anything they want onto campus. Yes, the adults, the people visiting, not so easy, but the students they can. So, okay, well,
one
thank
thing
you.
I can do to follow up with that to give you probably everybody a little bit more complete information is I would suggest having Rick Parfit back. Because I think he can give you a good update on, he probably came here before, I believe, and gave you an update, but a lot's been going on since then with the requirements of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, and so there's been a lot of really good progress that I'd like him to report to you, and then I will ask him specific to the metal detection issue in terms of where he is right now in his research and what he's seen across the country and where he sees technology going. And I do know that at some of our events now, like I was out at the Elementary Expo at FSW this weekend, and they were sending people through the metal detector system. So that's an example. They had 2 metal detectors, I believe, and so everybody that went into that large venue, which was 467 students, plus all their parents and the teachers and staff. So a pretty major event. You had metal detectors, and I also believe at graduation at FSW, when it's at that arena, that they also do that as well. So that is starting to happen. I know book bags, we shouldn't be seeing book bags like at football games, but that was something that they implemented last year, so they're not allowing that to happen unless they're being searched. So he could probably update you on where we are because we have taken those steps. The last thing I didn't mention before, but I've taken the extra step of asking our internal auditing department to literally audit our safety and security practices in the school district to ensure, and he's outside, he's independent from our safety and security team. So I want an outside, and I've asked Brian Williams, who's our staff attorney, to oversee that, to make sure that we have absolute compliance with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, which is intended to improve safety for students. And it does pick up things, like we had an elementary school where it was Orangewood Elementary, where the SRO was on maternity leave, and so they were without an SRO. So I asked our sheriff's department to step up and add an SRO. We had a charter school that had an armed guard. That was out of compliance, so we asked the sheriff's department to provide an SRO there. So we're trying to do everything we can to improve safety. So long answer, but we'll have Mr. Parfit come.
Hi, Ms. Green. Dante Chaffee, Fort Myers Technical College instructor. I have two questions, but I just want to give a real quick second to the young lady's point about metal detectors. I honestly think they can be implemented with minimal impact on ingress and egress, because I don't know a single high school student that would risk bringing some metal device and then getting detained for 5 minutes. You detain them for 2 seconds and they freak out. But anyway, my two questions. First, what % of funding that is filtering down from Tallahassee for mental health of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas initiative, what % would you estimate is being allocated to mental health?
I promise you, I would be glad to look at that. I cannot answer that off the top of my head. I would just be guessing.
Okay.
But I'm more than glad to filter that back.
Okay. Okay, thank
I
you.
think I can figure that out. It'll take me more than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. I believe that we allocated, $2 million specific that was categorical for that very purpose. I do want to say this is how important this issue is. We've had a number of student tragedies this year, and they're all tragedies, and that's one thing that is truly a nightmare in this position. And I whether you're a religious person or not, I mean, it's always on my mind. So like the first thing I do is pray for the safety of our kids, because you worry about all those moving parts every single morning. Having said that, we've gotten a lot of attention to our 2 tragedies at bus stops, and those are horrific, and if there's any good to come out of it, it's that we're working with our municipalities to improve bus stops, and we're also improving the student proximity-based assignment system, which we hope to create more permanent bus stops in the future. But those are 2 students. There are other students that also lost their lives, more than just 2 students. And if you really look back behind what's behind, I think the majority of those deaths were related to mental health issues. That most of these are community-based, but still, mental health is that important. If you think about teenage suicides, if you think about violence, we've lost students to both of those types of tragedies this year, and those ultimately are related to, in my opinion, mental health. So this issue is huge, and while we gave the bus stop issue a lot of attention, and we should have, we also need to give this issue at least that amount of attention.
Well, I definitely concur, and because historically, I think our county, at least the mental health professionals I've spoken to, have experienced devastation of their budgets in mental health. So I hope that will change. The other quick question. Across the state, yeah.
49, our rank is 49th for spending on mental health across the state. It has nothing to do with the schools.
Right.
That's mental health funding, period, for the state. And I tell you that I did, as you were talking, look back to my notes here, and one of the things that they were able to do was to give the schools greater flexibility in the FEFP with their mental health dollars to be able to make those determinations. And that's a really big deal, as opposed to just giving you a silo.
And we've added, as a result of that, more staff for mental health services, including counselors, social workers, and things like that. And our support person of the year was actually a social worker, and a gentleman down at Bonita Springs Middle School. And you talk about the impact of making those personal relationships with kids, and then you start to figure out whether or not there is an issue, and there's a person who can directly work with, build a relationship with the kid, and also build a relationship with the family, and channel resources to that student to help them with their needs.
Can I ask one more, just a quick answer? I apologize to everybody while you...
Dr. Carlin's running the show.
But basically, how was the MSD Commission, I know this is available online, but how were they formed, who appointed them, and how many students were on that commission?
I don't know the numbers on any of those. I can tell you that the appointments came actually through the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the Governor, and you do need to get it online because I don't want to misquote that. The number I quote all the time is 400 pages. And there were law enforcement was definitely on there. We did have law enforcement on, and there were kids on there that were from that area. Yes.
Thank you very much.
And always remember, this is Cedric Hall, that we have other members that have questions too. So, and then we have to take that into consideration.
All right, mine's pretty quick. Adam Tweet, Franklin Park Elementary School. You kind of answered mine a little bit about the bus stop. I was wondering if there is it becoming more of a problem throughout the state? Like, is it making its, I guess, noise more so in Tallahassee, or is it more just like locally?
On the bus stops?
Yeah, like, is there? You said that there is.
The specific.
Yeah, like, is there?
Issues that we've had here,
Yeah, is
the
it?
lighting and all those types of
Yeah, like, I'm wondering if like the state is taking a look at that as like a part of its safety with school
It is,
safety.
But a lot of that is a very local issue, unfortunately, and that seems to be where, and I think that you're all trying to deal with that.
Yeah, in fact, I think either tonight or tomorrow night, I think tonight because I couldn't be at this meeting, but we're there. We've got a team working with the city of Cape Coral, for example, on this very issue. So what we're trying to do is we're taking our bus routes and we're matching those with locations where there's lighting or not lighting. And then we're trying to work with the city to provide lighting, work with our Rotaries and now Kiwanis to provide benches at those sites. And then ultimately the dream here is to provide sidewalks so the kids can walk there safely. And then with the proximity-based system, and it will help us become more efficient because we've been very customer friendly with the bus stops, but if we can say, look, we need to establish more permanent, safer bus stops for our students, but the bus stop has to be the bus stop. So we can't give you curbside assistance. You need to walk a little bit, but you'll be able to walk safely to that site. There'll be a bench there, there'll be lighting there, etc. The other thing that we're doing with everybody, we're doing this in Lehigh also. Fort Myers isn't as much of an issue, but Lehigh it's a huge issue in Lehigh. So we're working with the municipal district to also do the same type of thing, and the county. The other thing that's very, very important, and I have to tell you, I was coming up, I drive to work kind of through the back roads. I live in Buckingham, so I kind of wander around Tice Street and up Ortez and all that. And what's really cool is I see parent after parent after parent at these bus stops. So what our dream is to try to create these bus stops where you have these partnerships where parents or community members that are vetted can actually help us with the supervision piece and kind of own a bus stop and provide that. Because I'm telling you, when I come to work every single day, if I'm coming at a time where elementary schools are at bus stops, like those early elementary schools, there's a lot of parents out there. Now, some people work and everything, but if we could provide a coordinated effort, that would be another thing that would be great. So we're going to do a big campaign coming into the start of the school year to try to put those partnerships together so we can make safer bus stops for kids.
I would think, too, just because of the experience that I've had in Tallahassee, that this is something that really has to be dealt with locally, only because the last thing you really want, in my Carol Green's opinion, is you don't really want Tallahassee telling you what to do about that, because that decision's better made when you do that overlay, like Dr. Atkins is talking about, overlay locally, and I think it's pretty darn amazing how many people in our community have stepped up and who felt the pain of what happened with that. And so I think that's remarkable to see them do that.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
At this time, we're going to have to move on to the next portion of our presentation. It's my understanding Ms. Green has volunteered, though, to sort of stick around for a while. Maybe there'll be some opportunity afterwards for some additional questions or perhaps one-on-one if necessary. But at this time, I'm going to introduce Ms. Cindy McClung, our Director of Continuous Improvement, who's going to facilitate a process for us to provide some comment and advice on legislative priorities. So it's possible that some of your other questions or thoughts might surface in this part where we can attempt to give some recommendations.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott, and thank you, Carol, for that information. It's nice that we have someone who, for beginners, enjoys doing this, but also who is familiar with the process and really keeps a close eye on it for us and has our best interests at heart, so we appreciate that. This weekend, as we were watching what was happening and what wasn't happening in some cases, Dr. Carlin and I were looking at what are those things that we think will have legs next year, as Carol mentioned, and we came up with 3 areas that we felt would probably be of interest to this group. The mental health funding, which you heard some talking about, traditional versus charter school funding, and then teacher compensation. So just real briefly, under the mental health funding, one of the areas that we see a shortage in for next year is funding for training, because it is a requirement that all of our instructional and support staff receive mental health awareness training, which it's wonderful, and it's really good training, but it's 6 hours of training, and it requires 2 people to be there and in a class of 30. So we can't do a whole school at a time, so it's a slow process. They are bringing about some additional methods of training, doing some online, some blended, but it is very time-consuming and expensive training, and it's important training. So that's one area that we know that there's a shortage. I heard you mention that the silo, so there will be some latitude with that funding, but still we're going to need some funding in that area. The traditional versus charter school funding, particularly the PICO funding, 0 to traditional schools, 100% of it going to charter schools. And then teacher compensation, there are really 2 areas around that. The first one is just overall pay. And we all know that, that we would love to be able to provide additional support to our teachers and to raise pay across the board. But then there's also that structure, the issue of how the pay increases take place, whether it's an across the board or whether it's a bonus type. It's really good news about the best and brightest, how that's been changed, but there still is that bonus piece of it rather than an across the board. So, and there's a lot of pros and cons on both sides. So we thought of these 3 areas that these were pretty important enough for this group to consider making a recommendation to the board. So what we would like to find out is which one's the most important to you tonight. So we have a little Kahoot to take a vote, because it's a fast way to take a vote. So if you will go to your phone or other personal device and just go to Kahoot it. I'm going to leave that up for just a second, and then I'm going to go over here and get Kahoot up so that you can see how to vote for your choices. Should be right there. Oops. Oh, that's. There we go. Yeah, it should come up here in just 1 minute. Your PIN number or your game number. Oh, sorry, I forgot about the sound. Let me turn that down a little. So there's the PIN number. So if you go to Kahoot it and enter that PIN, and you'll see people are being added as we go. So we'll give people a minute to get in. Yes. Thank you. Anyone still trying to get in? We're good? Okay. We're going to go ahead and start it then. So you're just going to push the shape on your phone that matches your top priority.
Okay, so you're weighing in mental health funding in red with the triangle, the diamond traditional versus charter school funding, and then the circle teacher comp. Did we run out of time?
All right, so we're pretty close there. So right now we have two that are pretty much a tie. Our teacher compensation obviously was the first one there, and then right up there with the mental health funding. So I'm going to switch back. Ignore the directions on the screen. Since teacher compensation was the number one, we will go with that one for tonight, with the caveat that you can address the other two as well at the next meeting. But we wanted to at least have this evening to be able to provide at least one recommendation. And looking at time, it is now 7:30, so we'll probably will only have time for the one recommendation. Originally, we were going to split you up into your breakout groups, but because it's not a really large group tonight, I don't think we need to break into 4 different groups. So what we will do is, so that you have a little bit of time to talk and to share, we'll just split into 2 groups, and Dr. Carla and I will facilitate those 2. So if people on this side would move back to D, you'll have a chance to be able to talk there. And then this side, we'll just talk right here, and we'll come back together and get the main points of that recommendation that you would like to go forward tonight. Welcome back. So we'd like to hear what both groups came forward with a recommendation. Who's speaking for this group? Thank you, Kathy.
The third page, there was like an additional,
Our group decided
there may be other people.
we'd like additional dollars put into the base student allocation as a priority. And also not get rid of the fees, but our priority would be that the additional dollars put into the base student.
Okay, so I'm hearing priority is base student allocation funding increased so that money could be used toward teacher compensation across the board equally, and now clarify for me the part about bonuses.
We still want that on the table.
You still want bonuses on the table? Okay. All right, thank you. Scott?
I'm not sure. I didn't step back fast enough. Our group also sounds somewhat similar. We didn't specifically say base student allocation, but what our group said is that we want to encourage our legislature to raise overall funding and focus on the fact that we're woefully low nationwide in the statewide support we provide for teacher salaries. At the same time, we would like there to be less restrictions on the individual districts on how they allocate the money. So we want the state to raise the amount of money it provides for education and teacher salaries while not overly restricting how each district allocates those teacher salaries.
Thank you. So I'm hearing consensus on the additional funding to recommend to the board that one of the legislative is in the bonus piece. Bonuses still on the table with this group. This group was saying we'd like the flexibility to be able to use those funds as desired. And Dr. Atkins had explained that with those bonuses that there is a restriction around the percentage that you can pay certain teachers. So if a highly effective teacher gets X amount, then an effective teacher can only get 75% of that, is it? 50 to 75% of that pay. So some flexibility around that. Is this group okay with talking about the flexibility, but still keeping your bonuses on the table? Thumbs up? Okay. All right. So what we would like to do is refer this to executive DAC for the wordsmithing, and they will bring that forward to the board. It'll go into the format. Will that go out to to DAC before that goes forward, Dr. Carlin?
So typically what would happen is we would include that in the minutes, and then that would be distributed to our members. And then if there's opportunity, anything is misstated or, otherwise, then they would have opportunity to let us know. And actually that would occur through LaTanya, but we will go with the wording that you just recommended.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time and the comments. And now I will turn this back over to Scott to wrap us up for the evening.
I believe that brings us to public comment from non-DAC members on any non-agenda items. Seeing none, open the floor. We have a few minutes, actually. I know there were a few people that had some questions that didn't get answered. I would say we have the opportunity and are good of the order. Ms. Green is still here, unfortunately for Ms. Green, and we have about 3 or 4 minutes of time for questions. So run up here to the podium if you didn't get to ask your question, and let's do that for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Kathy Good, Raymond C. Page Elementary. I don't have a question. I would just like to thank so much our superintendent for all his hard work this year, and Mrs. Fisher, and just to give them all the credit in the world, because I know how hard most of our school board works towards supporting Dr. Atkins, and I just want him to know how much he is greatly appreciated. So, thank you so much.
Hi, Enrique Diaz, Mariner High School. I had a question regarding the science, teaching of science in elementary school. I wondered if there's any plans to have an allotted specific time for science. I think science education is so important. And whether it's a half an hour to an hour devoted specifically to science education in elementary, this is a time to spark that interest in science in the children. We can have science activities, etc., along with the teaching of science, and I think that that will go a long way to promote that very important subject. And I hope that somehow they will allot time for science in elementary schools. Second thing is more an observation, and it's real quick. The ROTC program, I'm so happy that it's growing, but our universities, our local universities, don't have an ROTC program to the best of my knowledge. So Lee County school kids have to leave Lee County in order to have follow-up in this if they are pursuing a military career. So I would like to see our universities, if we can convince them to offer an ROTC program so our kids don't have to leave Lee County for that. Okay?
That's a good point.
That's a great point.
Great point.
Great point.
Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you, sir.
Hey there. Thank you for having us tonight. In Godsey, Three Oaks Elementary. So real quick, and I don't know if I'm asking this the right way. I'm just bringing it from ISAC committee. With the decreased budget statewide for education, how does Change for Change help kind of counter that a little bit? While I understand that that funding can't go towards teachers and staff, Three Oaks Elementary in particular, our students number is going up by 50 students next year. However, they are decreasing in teacher staff and staff. Lunches, because of the increase in students, is going to start at 9:45 in the morning and end at 1:15 in the afternoon. That's our lunch period. That's a really early and really late lunch. As well as the concern is that we have portables out there at Three Oaks Elementary, and we're actually kind of concerned about the number of students per square footage. They're really not even going to have what's allotted per person in that area. So I know that's a loaded question. I apologize. But I guess the main thing is, how does Change for Change help counter or help with that, the decreased budget? I'm sure you may have answered it in a graph, but I might have missed it.
Not that specific. I'll answer it specifically now. You do have a difference between, of course, the operational and the capital budget, and of course that can only be spent for capital expenditures. However, one of the things that you can spend capital dollars on is staff that actually helps you maintain your capital assets. So people that help us in the maintenance department maintaining buildings. So what I've asked our team to do, which they are in the process of doing and have already accomplished some of this work, is they have start to identify additional staffing positions that have been paid for traditionally out of the operations budget, and move those to pay for those positions using capital dollars, and that frees up operational dollars that then can be used for compensation. So we've already done, between the last 2 years, we've been able to move $9 million that used to be capital expenditures back into operations. The first was the board used to do what was called a growth increment model, which shaved off some FTE and put it into the capital budget. I went to the board, we discontinued that, and so that was about $4.5 million, about half of that is now back in the operations budget and is in compensation. Then they've identified some additional positions. The goal this year was to identify $5 million worth of positions that can be paid for out of the capital dollars. They've done that, so that gets us to a little over $9 million. And then next year, they're hoping to do another $9 million out of the capital, or $5 million out of the capital budget to make that a grand total of almost $15 million that will be now paid for in the capital budget that was being paid for in the operations budget. Some things that we didn't think about before were technology positions where they're maintaining and servicing large mainframe computers. Those are positions that we're finding we can use capital dollars because that's a big capital asset, and so we can use some technology positions that we weren't using. We're also exploring, now we got an audit finding, and we don't want audit findings, but building supervisors, the portion of their job that they really spend a lot of time maintaining a building. The problem is that if we do that, then we have to be very careful if our building supervisors, which are not custodians, the building supervisors aren't conducting cleaning and things like that, because if they're doing that, that's not considered acceptable for paying for out of the capital budget. You have to pay for that out of the operations budget. So those are some things that we're doing that has already helped to the tune of $9 million. The last thing I just want to mention is part of our team in ISD, Information Services Division. There, you've heard about gov deals, and we take our old computers and refurbish them and retain and take those revenues and put them back into the general fund. That was about $500,000. We predict $700,000 next year with a goal of about 1.3 2 years from now. We're now deciding that we're going to take those gov deal sales from our used equipment and take those dollars, instead of putting them back just in the general fund, that we're going to target those for teacher and support staff compensation specifically. So the more money we raise there, the more money we can put into that. So,
Try to summarize.
sorry, long
That's
answer.
okay.
And that brings us to the end of our allotted time for a meeting, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. If somebody wants to stay. Hunty with a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Yes, it has.
Second from
It's so good to see you.
Franklin Park. And with that, all in favor? I will see everyone in September. I don't know, do I have the date? It is going to be September, oh my gosh, September 11th of 2019.